Kevin, great to meet you. Thank you for doing this. And it's one of the blessings I think of social media. You did a post a week ago. We were able to connect pretty fast, and you made yourself available. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Mike. I'm excited.
You know, sometimes I do this, sometimes I don't, but I think it's appropriate here for people to understand who you are and some of your background, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Kevin Malone. I'm a second generation financial advisor. I've been around the business of stock market, and finance my entire life. My dad was an advisor since the day I was born and knew it's exactly what I always wanted to do. And I knew with my math abilities that I was succeeding in that it was going to be a great fit for me as well. So went to college, graduated with a major in entrepreneurship, and springboarded that straight to getting hired at Edward Jones um, Investments and went through their training program, passed the Series 7, Series 66, became a registered advisor, and then 4 years ago started my own firm, left Edward Jones, and been trying to help people make money and learn financial literacy ever since.
What do you attribute to? I mean, you've amassed a rather large following on X, and I mean, and I was just going through. You know, we were talking about some of the people that I've had on here that follow you. You know, and for people that, and I'll put your X handle on the show notes when I publish this. But what do you attribute to? You know, people. You know, your audience growing the way it is.
Um, Most of the growing that I've gotten is being someone that works in Wall Street, works in investments, that's willing to call out Wall Street on corruption, to call out CNBC on pushing their own narratives for where people should invest their money. And usually it's into terrible things. They're getting, paid speaking fees to convince people to invest in these things. That's why CNBC is registered with the SEC as a entertainment company and not a news company, because they can say whatever they want. And so I just started posting things on X that I saw as corrupt Wall Street practices. I've been in the GameStop community since 2020 with Keith Gill and a couple of others before Ryan Cohen ended up buying in to the stock, and the entire world got to see the market corruption from GameStop in January 2021. And so that just springboarded me into, it kind of sucked. My whole life, the stock market is this free trade market or fair trade market to grow your wealth. And I went from the mindset of 28 years of growing wealth for people to now protecting their wealth from the corruption that's out there. So then, through Reddit and X, started learning and posting more and more about market corruption. And I pretty much just grew from there by my findings that I was posting.
I'm glad you brought up the GameStop because I've never had anybody on here to talk about that before. And for people that don't know GameStop, would you mind, kind of we go off track here for a few minutes and talk about that and what you said you've been you're very familiar with it.
Very. Yeah. I've been an investor since April 2020,
Right. So Kevin, let me
when
interrupt you a
COVID
second. Let
happened.
me let me interrupt you a second. So GameStop for people maybe that don't know, retail store, video games, and if I'm saying something wrong, correct me. Video games. What else? I haven't been in GameStop in a
What
long time, but
collectibles, collectible cards. Their online presence is massive now, their e-commerce growth through the website. And they just got into PSA grading cards, $100 billion market of graded collectible cards, from, 100-year-old baseball cards to $1 million Pokemon cards. Anyone in the United States can go to their local GameStop and submit cards to get graded, which used to be a really hard task, and you had to ship everything and pay everything yourself and not know where it was. Now there's a GameStop in almost every single city in the United States, so you can just drive down there, bring your 10 cards you want to get graded, and GameStop's making money on the gradings that they're getting. Plus, they're coming out with an online marketplace store where they can buy and sell graded cards. And like I said, $100 billion industry.
What's graded cards? Okay, what do you mean graded? Like the
Graded cards.
value?
So you have a Charizard Pokemon card and you send it in to get graded by professional graders. Okay, there's a company that will grade the quality of the card and list what it is. They'll put it in a sealed, clear box and say, it's between a one being terrible quality, ran over by cars and stuff, to a 10, never touched by hands, perfect corners, and the higher the grade, the higher the value of the card. And so you could have this, card laying around where you send it in to get graded, it comes back a 9 or a 10, almost flawless, and you didn't know you're sitting on a $25,000 card
Are,
that way.
are they
So you can get them graded.
are they doing it for like basketball, like a Jordan rookie card? I mean, is there no limits to
Yeah.
what the? Oh,
I believe there's limits on uh like I'm trying to think of the right word for it. Not artifacts, but there's pretty much no limits to what type of card it is, but they're not doing like authentication on like paintings or coins or something like that. But as far as cards go, I'm pretty sure you can send in any card you want to PSA grading from the GameStop store and they'll grade it. Magic the Gathering and Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, basketball, hockey cards I saw on the website. Pretty much all of them.
I didn't even know that. Wow, that's genius. So then, if I'm the consumer and I bring that in, I have to pay for it. They charge me a
Yep.
fee.
Yep. Yeah, and then they ship it out. You get a tracking number. You get to follow it to the factory where it gets graded. You get to know the second it gets back or it's on its way, and then you just drive down and get them. Back in the day, you had to like go get a cardboard box, put them all in there, go to the post office, mail it to PSA grading, and wait for them to come back whenever they did. Now they have, this drop-off location in every single city to where you can just walk in, do this, pay the grading fee, which has always been there if you were going to do it yourself too, the last 20 years. But you can just do it all through your GameStop now. And it's also bringing in traffic to the stores, people seeing things they might want. Then GameStop, when they get the card back, they can give you offers on those cards, knowing what they're worth and everything to store credit, cash for your item. If they do that, they usually either display them in the store or they'll put them up on their website so that their e-commerce can have this giant collection of collectible cards.
It's like a car lot, man.
Yeah, card lot.
Wow. I gotta. It makes me want to walk into one now because it's been years since I've stepped foot in a GameStop. So okay, so people now have an idea if they didn't before what it is. What? How did you get introduced to this whole thing of and how this story became compelling and into your work? Not compelling, but how it.
Uh, so in April 2020, COVID's full bore just blowing up the world, right? And so I'm scanning companies, hundreds of companies per day looking for value in these that are knocked down way too hard by this pandemic that I think are going to make a recovery. And when I was going through the hundreds of stocks, I noticed that GameStop had a short float percentage of 99.99%. And I mean, it perked my ears. I've never heard of a short float being almost an entire company of the shares sold short. So I call the data company I'm getting my data from, and I ask them if 99.99% is the highest that their computers will allow it to go up to, could this be higher? And they said that 99.99 is the highest that they can display on their data, but it could be higher than that. So I thought in my mind, all this takes is just one news article. If the whole entire company is sold short to where all these shorts are going to have to go find shares to buy back and it's going to explode. So I put myself and my clients a small position into this as, an aggressive play, maybe 1%, 2% of their portfolios, because I saw the value of, this store is everywhere. They have an ungodly amount of merchandise. And then a few months later, Michael Burry was invested in it at the same time. And then a few months later, Ryan Cohen buys in and buys in massive, almost 10% of the company. And the stock starts exploding. Then news is getting around everywhere on the internet about it, especially Wall Street Bets back then that only had 1 million people on there. Everyone's noticing, Roaring Kitty, deep fucking value, um, and GameStop this way. So from there, a few months later, the squeeze starts, and GameStop going from $4 a share, and then it's 20, and then it's 40, and then it's 80, and then it's 120, and then it's 250, and then it's 383, and then it's 483, and goes up 10,000%. And
And how
it
fast,
broke the
Kevin?
world.
How fast did it go up like that?
Few days.
What were you thinking
Jan
watching this?
that I was right, that they screwed up. They sold more than an entire company's float short because they were that convinced that it was going to go bankrupt, that they did illegal shorting. They shorted more shares than there were, called naked shorting, where they didn't actually have shares to borrow from where they could short them. And the stock was exploding because of it. And once it got to a 20, $30 billion price tag on their short from when they shorted at 100 million, now they owe 20, $30 billion in losses. It was blowing up hedge funds like Melvin Capital closed their doors, and they were one of the largest shorts on it. And then in January, the whole entire market cuts off the buy button on GameStop, and Robinhood and Schwab and E-Trade and Fidelity, they all turn off the buy button, but not the sell button. They cheated because they lost. And the stock dropped 70% in a few hours. I watched my clients' nest eggs that they've grown forever go down millions of dollars because Wall Street said so, because they all colluded to turn off the buy button on this stock. And so from that day on, it was, me protecting clients' assets from Wall Street and pointing out their corruption.
What do you think would have happened if they wouldn't have turned off the buy button?
It would have gone nuclear into the thousands of dollars per share. And, they could have paid the price tag and been out of it. It would have been just a short squeeze at that time. And, like it would have been like, do you know the Volkswagen short squeeze in 2008, where Porsche bought a majority or was the highest holder of Porsche, and then it squeezed into the hundreds of dollars per share? They would have been able to get out of it for massive losses, but it would have been over. Instead, they cheated, and millions of people from that day on just kept buying shares and holding and buying and holding and buying and holding. And so there's this massive retail investor sector of 1 million plus people that own GameStop that have just been accumulating for years. And now they're stuck in an even harder spot because the lower the price goes, the more shares people can buy every single month. And the higher it goes, the more they're losing on their shorts.
Was that a signal for you at that point to like the little guy has no chance and they will always just cut the switch? Because it was all about the little guy in that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was David versus Goliath. And it, convinced me that they're still going to be able to win. Nobody went to jail. They had a Congress hearing on the GameStop saga. We had CEOs of companies that lied under oath to Congress. Nobody got charged with anything. There was no repercussions. And I was just like, this is so unbelievable. Most people that learn about the saga for the first time ask how there's not this many people in jail. Like, how did this happen? You know, and I don't think it's going to be that way forever. We saw about a year ago, Trump and RFK Jr. start calling out market manipulation against, his DJT stock. And then RFK Jr. buys some GameStop because he wants to stop market corruption. And so I do have faith that something's going to come down the line and finally change this market. But I believe that the corruption and the fake shares are out there, and thousands of companies got so big that it can't be fixed with, a snap of a finger. Like the whole thing would blow up. It's so big of a problem that it has to be done like strategically without blowing anything up.
Wasn't AMC part of that with GameStop, or was that its own animal
It was in the same exact time and saga.
where they were running up the shares on AMC?
Yeah, yeah. So that happened. They went in January when GameStop uh went nuclear. There was a bunch of retail companies that were in baskets and swaps that were heavily shorted. And so 10, 15 stocks all launched up at the same time with no news because GameStop was in these products going through the roof. And so AMC did the same thing. And then AMC ended up doing it again higher than GameStop as far as the percentage, not a dollar amount, in June of 21. And GameStop was running at that time up as well. But that's when AMC got most of their recognition. And then their CEO started liquidating his shares at those high prices, and nobody saw the signal of that. GameStop CEO Ryan Cohen never sold a single share. He was buying at $6 a share, and it went to 500, and he didn't sell one. But AMC CEO was liquidating his positions up high, and nobody saw that. Every time he sold, the price didn't go above that price again.
And what was Robinhood's? Was the spokesperson of Robinhood ever called into question of why or who advised them to kill the buy switch?
Oh yeah, Congress asked them, and they said nobody. They said they didn't talk to Citadel, that they didn't tell them to turn off the buy switch, and it came out in a later report 6 months later that they did indeed talk to Citadel. That was Vlad Tenev, the CEO of Robinhood, and they did have communication. So that's where they lied under oath to Congress about speaking before the buy button was removed, and they did. They did talk about it. Robinhood was selling shares to their investors that they didn't even have, their market makers didn't have. And so, you know, they're selling IOUs expecting the price to go down, and then it just keeps going up and up and up, 100%, 100%, 100%, compounding. And that's an IOU they owe these people because they don't have actual shares. It's just a number in their app there. And so those IOUs became so many billions of dollars that they had to shut it down. They didn't have that much liquidity to cover that.
What an incredible story to be a part of, man. I mean, I remember hearing about that, and I'm not, don't have the finance background that you have, but or at all. But mainstream person, hearing about that story, it was unbelievable because it was one of those things to me, like you said, David and Goliath, where Goliath was on the ropes. They were on the ropes, and freaking powers that be came in and just killed it.
Yep. Yeah. They said there would have been multiple brokerages going under the next few days if they hadn't done that. And that's their fault. They did the corruption. They should have gone under.
Do you think the whole financial system would have melted down potentially, Kevin, from this? I mean, how far do you think the contagion could have gone?
It would have been massive. It would have not been the whole financial system. It wouldn't have brought down, the bond market's way bigger than the stock market. But these market makers that have these special exceptions to create liquidity for everyone can sell fake shares and buy stuff with no money every single day to create, fair trades for everyone. Like they're not making billions of dollars off of this. And as of a few months ago, off exchange market maker orders became more than on exchange orders for the first time ever. So there's more stuff going on in the background than on the lit exchanges, which means the prices are usually fake that you're seeing. And those are the companies that can sell infinite amount of shares if there's buyers out there without having them. And then they can route those orders, they can route the buy orders to the dark pool and put anyone's sell orders on the lit market, and that stock will drop. Or they can do it in reverse to put it at whatever price they want, because these market makers for stocks are also the biggest market makers in the world for options trades, where they can get it to close at the max pain price, where the most options expire out of the money as possible, and they reap all the premiums on there.
Don't you love being on your own now that you can just freely talk about all this stuff and like
Love it. Love it. Love not working for a financial company and being able to call them out on it. That's how I really exploded on X. Really, I had a couple hundred followers, and I got a voicemail from Charles Schwab, and I was using them. I was on my own, but I was using them as a custodian for my clients to hold all their assets, a third party in between, so that nobody has to worry. Yeah, I go to Vegas with all their money. And they called me and leave me a voicemail asking to borrow and lend out all my clients' GameStop shares. And I was like, are you joking me? So you guys want to borrow my clients' shares to lend to short sellers to make their accounts go down for my clients? And I took that voicemail and I posted it on X, and I woke up the next morning, there was like 100,000 views, and I had like 10,000 followers from like 100. And I was like, oh shit, uh, I'm gonna get a call today. And I did, but it was ridiculous. I have no problem. I would do it all over again. Like, where's their fiduciary responsibility when they're trying to lower my clients' account values by helping shorts lend out their GameStop shares? Who does that?
so how do you feel then about the state of where we are? Where the financial system's at right now in the markets.
It's in the same spot as far as the market makers exceptions, but I feel like some people are getting pinched pretty hard right now because, the market's imploding the last probably 8 weeks. I believe that the whole tariff war is a front, an excuse for the market needing to go down. Like in February, the stock market was at an all-time high on five different value metrics, the most expensive market in history on five different metrics. And it needs to go down. The Fed needs to pull in liquidity. Inflation's starting to go back up again, and the market's still high. They can't cut rates, even though they need to. The consumers are already getting smashed. But if they cut rates, inflation goes up again. What's the only way you can cause all the problems to be accomplished at the same time is to crush the markets. Crush the markets, inflation goes down because people don't have as much to spend out there. People start budgeting, it's a recession, then they can lower the rates.
Yeah, and I'm pulling up here really quick one of your posts on X last week, how I discovered you, and you wrote, breaking news. This is on February 16th. Federal Reserve reverse repo hits its lowest level in 1,454 days. Now, in talking to a few people and trying to get an understanding what that means, and I'm going to ask you your take on it. They're intentionally trying to crash the market. Am I correct by saying that?
I believe they are, yes, to solve all these problems at once. Not with the reverse repo, but in general, all the things, the craziness of Trump. He has the ego that's strong enough to like take the blame for this. He has to crash this to get inflation and the markets down.
What is your definition of crash then? And how much pain? I mean, it's a case by case, but individuals that have no understanding that might listen to this, what can they expect?
In February, when the markets hit those high valuation levels, highest ever, more than the dot-com bubble, more than the Great Depression, if the market as a whole dropped 50%, it would still be above the average value over that time. It would still be expensive on a 100-year chart if it went down 50%. Um, that's what I would expect for numbers to get back to reality. And the markets are only down 20% right now. Some, well, after the last 2 days of up, not even 20% down, but it's still extremely expensive,
So
not
you,
even close to where it should be.
so you're anticipating another potentially 30% drop in the values.
I would, yeah. I personally think so. Like I said, that's just to get back to reality, not going past, the mean line usually goes way past there in exuberance, and then in fear and COVID and stuff, it goes way past there on the bottom end in fear. And that could be a 60, 70% drop
Yeah, I was
or 90% like the dot-com bubble for NASDAQ.
I was talking to somebody this morning, and I've been harping on the boomers, but this is just another example to me of I can't some of them, and not all of them, because I get all these nasty emails saying I'm a boomer and I know what's going on. I'm not. I'm generalizing, but I'm not, because I know there's some boomers that are really in tune. But this one particular guy, I literally walked away. I'm like, this is why I fucking can't talk to people like you anymore, because you don't even listen. You don't even take the time to listen to me and let me get my statement out. And he was saying, he's like, these tariffs, these countries are taking advantage of us for so long, and fentanyl. I'm like, okay, I'm sure fentanyl ties into the. I'm sure to get rid of the fentanyl coming in, I'm sure that maybe that plays a small part, but that's not what this is. But the guy wouldn't even listen to me to let me finish my statement. And
Yeah.
he said, well, in 6 months, this is all going to go away. I'm like, okay, I hope you're right, but I don't see it. I mean, do you see this? How they're portraying 6 months, this is all going to go away and we'll be fine?
That depends on how fast and strong the market crash is. It could be. Like if they can drop this thing and like rip off the Band-Aid. Everything, in my opinion, has been fake since COVID. You know, our the whole world's shut down. All GDPs are shut down. The Fed prints $8 trillion. And by the end of the year in a worldwide pandemic, the United States stock market and housing markets at all-time highs it's all fake. And I said from that day that like they're gonna have to pay for this. And it's gonna come in inflation, hyperinflation. It's gonna come. And they're gonna owe this bill for kicking the can down the road. They should have just everyone should have just went into, budgeting mode recession because it was a black swan event nobody saw coming. Everyone would have, saved their money, not been spending, and then within a year or two, been back to new market all-time highs, and everything would have been good without that super inflation coming. But instead, we sent out checks and stimulus payments and more salary than most people were making while they're working, and everyone goes spending everything. The economy's booming on this fake money that's printed, and what do we get 2 years later? Massive inflation. And now we're paying for it. They got to suck that money out to get back to reality.
Yeah, I learned that the system was fake in 2008. When they bailed out the automakers, they went so far. Not only the financial institutions, but bailing out all the automakers, and nobody went to jail. Nobody paid for anything.
Yep.
People short sold their houses. They walked away. Some walked away from cash because they sucked out whatever was left on the HELOC. And yeah, they had a little ding on their credit, but 3 to 5 years later, they could buy a house again with little down. But there was no consequence for any of that.
Yep. Exactly. It hasn't changed.
And so now you go to COVID, you're pumping all this money out there. I mean, do you think we're at the end of this debt-based system?
No, I wish we were, but I don't see how to get rid of the national debt without, everything collapsing. I don't know how they can do it. The compound interest on this 35 trillion of debt is so strong now that it pretty much can't be solved. We're paying $1 trillion a year in interest now. that's not has nothing to do with the rest of our budget and tax dollars, and still we're refusing to tax, billionaires and, pull in this revenue we need to stop this problem. But I don't think it can be fixed. I think it's going to have to be changed, a new dollar, a world currency or something where they can just erase everything and act like it didn't happen.
And that feels like what they're doing, doesn't it?
Hmm. Well, think the Fed printed $8 trillion and the value of the US dollar went up on 33% increase in money supply. The US dollar went up in value, pretty much because they can choose what it's worth. Now the dollar's crashing when they need to pull that liquidity back in, and the dollar's down 10%. Bonds are down that were sold out there. They can buy this all back cheaper.
One big grift, Kevin. It's just one big. So do you have you the Mar-a-Lago Accord or the Sovereign Wealth Fund? Pay attention to that stuff and what Howard Lutnick's talking about and Scott Bessent in regards to where this might go, and also the repatriating of all the gold that's been coming back here.
I've been paying attention to gold a lot because of its all-time highs and everything. I haven't paid attention to most of that other political stuff. I feel like it's all just show on TV. You know, I don't believe Trump or Jerome Powell are the ones, making the decisions. They're the faces in front of everything. You watch any villain movie or Bond movie or something like that, the people in charge are never the ones on TV, right? And that's a different conspiracy, but that's how I feel. So I just turn off the noise. I'm just looking at data. Uh, but the gold, I get why it's running up completely because the dollar is going down and there's less confidence in it in the US. But I feel like they're pushing gold way too much on these finance shows and talking about it way too much, where they're going to get all these boomers to hold the bags at 3,500 an ounce and then just smash it.
What
They're
about
advertising it a ton, just like last year. Oh, Nvidia is going to go to $80 trillion because we said so. And it's at like ungodly high valuations. And they're pushing everyone to hold it at the top. And then Nvidia drops 30, 40, 50% from there. They're pushing narratives on TV, get people to hold or buy and hold at the high, or get people to sell out at the low and put more fear into them, in, like in a COVID situation, so that they can all buy as low as possible on these stocks.
that was well, I was going to ask you what your thoughts are what your thoughts are on Nvidia.
Extremely overvalued as far as metrics go on, price to earnings, and I feel like it was a bull rush of demand for chips that everyone's stacked up on now, and there's too many of them. And chips are pretty cyclical in these cycles. And okay, so the world got into AI and they needed a ton of them, and NVIDIA's sales numbers were insane. But their price to sales ratio and every other metric just makes them like you'll become profitable in 100 years on their best year they've ever had because everyone needs these chips right now, and then they're not going to need them next year. It's not like they disintegrate or they're meant to break every year where you'll have to be a reoccurring customer. Yes, they can invent new, bigger ones, but if everyone already spent their 10-year budget on building this warehouse for quantum computing or AI or something, they're not going to need that again for another 10 years.
Yeah, the whole AI, hearing the different sides of it on where it's going and the impact it's going to have. Um, I don't know. I mean, I feel like, well, it's already had a huge amount of impact, but 10 years from now, where does this all sit? And then you know, how many plants and how many chips are you going to need to accomplish this?
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be a growing sector for sure, but the amount they just sold for people preparing for it, these huge tech companies, they bought in preparation for that. so that they would have enough computing power and all these things. So they front ran it 5 years until like they're only using 10% of the ones they bought right now so far, but they got all their inventory ready to go in case it explodes. So that just means to me that they're not going to need more for multiple years because they bought so much in the beginning.
What about prices of silver?
Silver is very useful in manufacturing and doesn't get the love that it should. But I also believe that JP Morgan, who's been caught manipulating the prices of precious metals for 35 years, and their fines are so small that they continue to do so, can choose whatever price they want things to go to, especially in silver. They've been caught red-handed with silver multiple times, spoofing the prices. And so they're just choosing where it stays, sitting on their stockpiles. Think of diamonds and De Beers, like they have warehouses, they move diamonds around with tractors, but they only let out 1,000 diamonds a year to keep, the prices up.
What about copper then? Is copper in that category?
I don't know if they've been caught manipulating prices on copper. I feel like it'd be hard to do because it's needed so much every single day that it works a little bit more on supply and demand. You know, you get the collectible and money asset side from gold and silver instead of just the need for gold and silver in chips and solar panels and manufacturing things so that you can manipulate a lot more. There's a lot more, bars I'd feel like that are being saved or stored or something like this in gold and silver than there is with copper. I feel like they're needing it as fast as they're pulling out of the ground. And then it just goes up the more manufacturing that's going on that needs it. It kind of like oil. I feel like it's too big and too needed to manipulate the price.
Well, then copper mining might be a good place to go.
If building's going to continue to be exploding, but I think we're going into an extremely deep recession.
How deep do you
I
think?
mean, credit,
Oh, go ahead, Kevin. Sorry.
go ahead.
No, no, please. I was going to ask you how deep do you think
Oh,
this is going to go?
I think it's going to go big. Credit cards just hit the highest amounts ever for consumers at the highest interest rate APR ever. I have a conspiracy theory because I've never been able to prove it that once COVID was going on, Trump and Biden talked to the banks for like, people are going to need money to spend, and especially once inflation started picking up. If anyone asks for increases on their credit card limits, you tell them yes, they need to have this money to keep this economy going. And I have a feeling there's going to be a cutoff date. Like nobody can raise theirs again. And now you have people with $10,000 credit card maxed out instead of $1,000, where their payment's going to be more than their rent now in these impoverished cities and jobs. And it's going to just implode. Like bankruptcies are going to skyrocket. We're seeing missed car payments at the highest since 2011 right now. Almost nobody's talking about it. Credit card payments in default. They're going to start collecting on student loans that are in default right now in May. They're talking about.
It's
I
next
feel like there's
week,
no
right?
money out there.
Next
Yeah.
week, I think student loans.
Yep. Money's gone. That's where the reverse repo comes in.
But they always these people are so creative, man, and they're always able to like, kick the can down the road for a little bit longer. I thought again, I didn't think the system was going to survive after 2008.
Yeah. A lot of people didn't.
What about real estate, both on the residential and commercial?
Well, commercials already smashed. The work from home pretty much crushed all of that. Uh, Residential, I feel like will go down to I don't think people will ever see 2.5% APRs that they locked in on 30 years ever again. That really handcuffed them from being able to move again. Why are they going to move to a 7%, 8% mortgage? Their payment on that, they're going to have to go to a house that's a quarter as nice. to keep the payment the same. So there's not going to be the demand on the buy side from everyone that locked in those rates. And with people having, 60% of the country not having $1,000 right now, who's going to be buying up all this residential real estate? I feel like it's going to go down with it. It's been propped up. The biggest counties we saw growth in from COVID are seeing the biggest declines in their real estate already, and it'll spread wider from there.
Yeah, I live in Phoenix, and I was just watching a local news segment a couple days ago, and I mean, I'm astonished at half these businesses, especially restaurants. I don't know how they're staying open, and with the cost and labor, and consumer spending is down, discretionary spending. I mean, going out to eat I mean, it's cost you a lot of money to go out to dinner these days.
Yeah, it costs a lot of money to make your own dinner these days. Jesus, I look at the cash register every time it's self-checkout, like, and I make a good living, and I still get pissed off at the price. Like, I'm cooking dinner for my family for like $83. Like, and it's like meat and vegetables and a side. It's insane. It's expensive on both ends.
And they announce an old mall because all these malls are dying or are dead, and so they're revitalizing it. They revitalize it with a Whole Foods high end apartment. They all have the same thing. Like all these projects,
Hmm.
no matter what part of the country you're in, they're all like the same. Whole Foods, some local businesses, high end apartments, studios that are as high as 2 grand a month. I mean, I don't know who can afford to pay those rent rates, but yet you got more restaurateurs that are coming into this little area, and I'm just like, how the fuck? Like, how are these people going to survive? How long are they going to be around for?
As long as their credit card limits are allowed to increase that long, when they turn off that button, man. And I think they already did.
You think the
I
button's
think
been
that's why
turned?
yeah, on increasing rates. I think this is all going to happen together. And that's where we probably saw the hundreds of billions get wiped out from the repo market and the excess cash is dwindling.
One of my concerns with all this too, I was talking to somebody yesterday that I had on here, and she was concerned about the civil unrest this summer from the political standpoint. And I said, I don't that I could see civil unrest on the financial standpoint because if people start seeing their retirements go down to nothing, or severely, severe decreases, in my view, I mean, I hope this doesn't happen, but people are going to lose their shit, man.
Yep, I agree. It's going to happen. And they're also going to probably start budgeting. When their retirement accounts are hitting all-time highs every single month for the last 4 years, except for the quick pullback in 2022, I get to see it firsthand. My clients call me and they want to put in a pool and buy a new trailer and do all this because, their account went up 100 grand this year in their retirement accounts. But when they see it go down 50%, they'll be budgeting. They'll be spending less, and then that'll be the domino effect into the economy and the spending there, where they're not going to want to pull out money. I've seen people pulling out a lot less right now, or definitely pulling out less or nothing this year for, extravagant expenditures like that. But I've seen an uptick in clients that have never pulled out money needing it because their savings account's gone. Groceries are this expensive and gas is kind of the same, but rent went up, housing went up, property taxes, insurance, they're getting squeezed and needing money right now.
It's another grift, man. Property taxes. I mean, I was talking to somebody where he had a friend who's retired. They've owned their house since I don't know mid '80s, early '90s, and she has to go owns the house free and clear, but has to go back to work because her property taxes are so damn high.
Yep.
They inflate the value. I've heard this and I believe it. They inflate the values of these homes to increase the taxes to grift more from individuals.
Could be. And they also bought majority of them on 0% loans from the Fed in 2020 and 2021. So BlackRock goes out and buys 80% of the residential houses for cash and then chooses whatever rent prices they want. Property taxes go up, and then they're not selling those. So the inventory goes down on houses available to buy, prices go up. They locked in so many houses at just almost free money in
Are they,
2020 and 2021.
are they trying to box Powell in? Then at some point is he gonna like almost have a gun to his head and have to drop rates? In your opinion?
He's boxed in. Yeah, they have to because of the national debt. Like that's why I say they have to crash everything because inflation is going up right now. And so he and the Federal Reserve should be raising rates. If they raise rates again, everything just demolished. They can't. He's stuck between a rock and a hard place. He can't raise rates, but inflation's going up again. So how do you solve it? You crash everything. So if you lower rates, once the market drops 50%, the Fed usually steps in because they want spending to go out and everything. So they drop rates back down to zero. Everyone starts spending, buying houses again. And, inflation will go down because there's that many people with no money or half their money gone in a market crash that won't be spending as much. So they'll solve the inflation problem and the interest rate problem at the same time.
What do you tell your clients then as they're reaching out to you seeking your advice?
That we see this coming. I don't care that CNBC is telling you Nvidia is going up another 10,000%. There's no money out there. I'm looking at data instead of news everywhere at these valuations. And I tell every single one of them, we're ready for this and protected for this. And overly conservative at this time, very small position size in the stock market and have been for a year. So, we missed out on some of the gains in 2024, but at the same time, it all looks fake to me and it's all just hitting most expensive market in history month after month after month. And I'm saying, well, eventually and statistically, it goes the opposite direction soon. And boom, this year hit. Everyone's blaming on, Trump screaming tariff and stuff, but it had to hit anyways. There just had to be a reason to justify it.
Yeah, I have Craig Fuller from FreightWaves coming on next week, and who's a great follow if you don't if you don't follow him, talking about supply chain logistics and how this fallout from the tariffs. I mean, on the West Coast, drivers are just going to get crushed from all this.
Yep.
But there's no easy road anymore, and that's what people they want some light switch to fix reverse everything. There's no more easy roads.
Yeah. The problem's too big. There is no easy road. That's why crash solves everything.
What do you? Two things. You got time for two more questions?
Yeah.
One, a crash solves everything. Pull the band-aid off and move on. But these people, they're not going to. Doesn't seem that they're going to do that, right?
I don't know. It depends on if they're prepared for it or not. The people at the top are going to need to be prepared for it. I feel like those dominoes we saw fall over the last 4 years, the regional banks starting to implode, two in a day in California. And I guarantee how many other hundreds were a day away from the same thing happening before the Fed and FDIC stepped in. I feel they weren't ready to start the crash yet. They weren't in position. They weren't out of their positions to leave, the 200 million Americans on the hook for their money going down. They want to be out of this trade first or to profit from it. And so if they are prepared for it, they can do it as fast as they want. I'm hoping they rip the band-aid off. Everyone as a country too usually comes together during recessions. Everyone's down and everyone's hurt, and it kind of brings countries together on political sides too. And I'm not saying like everyone's gonna be like, oh, thank God for Trump, because they're not when he has to take the heat and Palace take the heat for this crash coming. But it's it just needs to get back to reality. The market can't just go to new all-time highs every single year at these valuations without inflation and all these other things just skyrocketing, people not being able to afford anything. Minimum wage is still the same as 2009.
Yeah, if you're a young person, you look pretty young. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
33?
33. Yeah. I'll be 47 next month. Young people like your age and younger, I feel for them because especially the ones that are in college, they get buried in debt. They can't afford to buy a house. They have to go to some shitty corporate job. We can spend a whole hour talking about that. Where you sit in your cubicle and fucking rot all day long
Yep.
and just to pay the debt. And then they finance a car. I mean, just you're just enslaved. But that's what
Yep.
they want, Kevin. That's they don't want people like you talking freely like this.
Well, I know.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I worry about the fragility of the system and how people will react. Because even during the Great Depression, I mean, people were tough, right? Life was hard.
Yeah.
People today, I mean, they're just not everybody again, but I mean, we're just incredibly a weak-minded society.
Yep.
What's your thoughts on Bitcoin?
That's a 1 hour question too. Uh, Technology is incredible of blockchain and Bitcoin. Um, it's what I look for in companies, biggest, most adopted, and most used by people in a sector. I I don't think it's going anywhere as far as going to disappear. And I feel like it's the solution they're thinking of for this worldwide finance to get rid of everyone's debt that's spinning in circles is to get some type of, world coin, whether it be Bitcoin or not, to, decentralize the system, which they'll still have ways of manipulating everything. They have ways to manipulate Bitcoin now already because the people that own the most can cause flash sales and skyrockets in price just because they own, a percentage of it. Uh, I think it's amazing how far it's come, how far it's been adopted. I used to, when cryptos were having their like second big run in 2016, after their 2013 run, and a lot more people were hearing about them. I can remember telling my clients, like, we're not buying these fake Chuck E. Cheese coins with our retirement funds that are out there. They're all fake and all this stuff. And then I had to stop having that conversation because all the US dollars are fake. Powell came on and had an interview saying he doesn't have to print money anymore. He can just send zeros to banks. And I was like, does that not seem like a problem? And, is Dogecoin any more fake than US dollars when 8 trillion were added to the system like that during a pandemic, backed by nothing?
Yeah, well, and that's with the Bitcoin or some type of roll coin, and I've said this, a CBDC is already here, man. Like they're not calling it that, and they probably never will. Well, they won't, but you do everything through your phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Technology's not going away.
No. Yeah. I agree. And banks are scared. Banks are scared. It still takes, days to move cash for ACH transfers, and you still have to pay money for wire fees. And yet those are all just numbers on a phone. It's not like they're taking money out of the vault to put in an envelope and send it to somewhere, but it takes this long now. They're making money on all these transfers. So, and holding your money for that extra day of interest that's going to be going out, they're scared that everyone can send, Bitcoin and all these other cryptos across the world in 10 seconds for minimal fees compared to wires. And so they're scared. I mean, banks make an ungodly amount of money on overdraft fees, wires, ACH. Um, what's that one that they all colluded to make? I didn't know that wires were a collusion between the banks. Like banks all create and keep the wire fees and everything up together, the top 10 banks. And they did, what is the Zelle app is owned by like five of the banks to transfer money when they've had all the security breaches and everything there. And that's so that they can make money off of Zelle too. Trying to get people to transfer money like it's a crypto wallet. But
I didn't know that either about that. I mean, I've used Zelle. I didn't realize it was a collusion between all these big institutions.
yep,
Yeah, people think we live in a free society anymore, man. They really have no clue what's going on.
ridiculous.
And that's where I know the Bitcoin. I've had people on here that specialize in it. The whole decentralization. I don't know how you're going to be able to do that. At some point, they're gonna get if they don't already, they're gonna get their tentacles around that.
I guarantee I've talked about it on my show plenty of times. If everyone at Coinbase or Robinhood said they wanted to transfer their Bitcoin out to their hard wallets all in the same day, those companies would implode that same day. You telling me they bought actual Bitcoin that's in everyone's accounts right now instead of just took their money and gave them IOUs? Yeah, they don't have it.
So, what are you working on now these days, Kevin?
Working on, growing my firm and protecting client assets same time, especially from this crash coming. And then as of a few days ago, just got onboarded to Quantum Bio as the advisor to the board of directors. At Quantum, I saw after the CEO came on my show and told me that he thinks there's a bunch of corruption and market manipulation on his company and his stock. I did my deep dive research into all of it and saw a lot of the same exact similarities as GameStop had. And so I met with the entire board of directors. I said, I've studied this for 5 years, ungodly amounts of time, and that I think I can save their company from this market corruption by doing these 10 things that have been proven to battle corruption. So now I'm working with the company, went from $1 billion company to $10 million company and high short float as well. Can't find shares out there. And I told them I think this thing can explode just like GameStop did once the corrupt people that have been selling all these shares they don't have of your company are forced to buy them back. So that's my new project.
What is Quantum Bio then? What do they do?
So Quantum Bio is working on a cure for MS, which obviously very hard to do. And then they also have products out there for alcohol poisoning, and uh, they have like a product on the line right now that's already released to the public called Unbuzzed. And imagine like the liquid IV packs for rehydration. This is developed by scientists to make you less drunk. So the all the chemicals and everything inside of there for your body and brain, instead of rehydration only like liquid IV does, these help with the interceptors in the brain. It helps your liver process the alcohol faster and get it out of your system. So this is something you take when you're like, I'm way too drunk. I feel like crap. You take this and it'd be like knocking 4 or 5 drinks off of your night to feel better again in a very fast time too.
So you believe in this company then?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
How do you find these companies, Kevin? Give me some more coffee and a mic exclusives here. Where are the diamonds in the
Uh,
rough?
I I have what I call a special superpower of ADHD and OCD. And so I scan probably at least 1,000 charts a day and at least 200 to 300 news articles. And so I'm always looking for opportunities that are out there extremely fast. Once I find them, then I do my deep dive the same exact way into all of their uh, numbers instead of listening to news articles. People are still out there that have never invested in GameStop that think it's a joke because of everything they hear on CNBC. They don't know that the company has 60% of its market cap in cash right now. The company has no debt. They're profitable. They don't report these things on the news. So you gotta dive in, get the data for them. I can't obviously give any more diamonds in the rough or other things that I've seen out there legally because I'm an advisor, but there will be other companies. I think Quantum can be a springboard if this plan works and the company is saved, just like GameStop was, that I will be able to take my tools and Quantum's tools as well and take it to other companies that have been ran into the ground by these market makers and market manipulation, just continuously beating down their stock.
Where do you get your news from, Kevin? What are your go-to sites?
Everything. Bloomberg Terminal, FinViz, I use for screening, FINVIZ. Um, the paid for subscription will also give you news articles on anything you're watching. You can build portfolios on there, screen thousands of stock, going by price to earnings ratio, debt, cash. Um, I go, I got my Google News working pretty good on their algo by liking and disliking news articles so that I can see a lot more finance coming up there. I discover a lot of finance stuff from X and Reddit now too. These are people posting real things and facts and data instead of paid for advertising, you know, that you'll see on the internet. So that's a lot more unbiased way to find these news articles or these, I should say, these sources of information because they're not getting paid to do it. They're just trying to show, numbers, companies, technical analysis, all these things that aren't being shown on Bloomberg.
Any handles on X you would recommend, or people that you follow?
Peruvian Bull is a great source. Ian Carroll. Uh, I've been working with Ian Carroll for over a year now, and I mean, he's the gem of being against corruption and exposing it. Uh,
I've been trying to get him on
he's
my
a great,
show, man. I've been trying for like a year trying to connect with him.
yeah, he's a tough cookie. We meet about once a week going over the Bear Trap docuseries, but he's been getting extremely busy since his Rogan interview.
Yeah, he got that, and then he had the whole I'm blank, not James Lindsay, the guy that was just on from the UK that was talking about what Ian Carroll and what Daryl Cooper said. He spent an hour criticizing Daryl
Yeah.
Cooper and Ian. I had to turn it off. It's so funny. This is how polarizing everything is now because people were like, "Oh, I don't. Why am I blanking on his name? The guy from the UK." Anyway, he was asking Dave Smith, like criticizing what those two guys were saying, and I'm like, "You spent an hour. Those guys aren't even here. Why are we spending an hour listening? What you criticizing what other guys said that aren't even on the show?"
Yeah.
But it was good for him, though. I
It's
mean, probably Ian, the publicity. So, Kevin, where can people find you?
uh mostly on X at Malone underscore wealth. Uh my website, malonewealth.com. There's also info on the charitable fund we have on the website as well. And then those are pretty much the only two. Any questions from me, the fastest way to get a hold of me is my AMA shows, Ask Me Anything on X. There's no real set time for them, but I do a couple per week. I'll probably do one today, later, where anyone can raise their hand and ask me questions there because my DMs and emails and everything are so flooded that those people get answered a lot quicker. But that'd probably be the quickest way.
What do you tell the masses that are going to listen to this and probably reach out to me? Because there's a feeling of people being scared and fearful out there. What do you say to that?
They should be. The things they don't understand that are going on in the background are extremely bad right now, and they need to be fixed so that hyperinflation doesn't get a hold of everything. And so they should be scared. They should be, budgeting. They should be preparing for a steeper downturn and not listening to what the main financial shows are telling them, not listening to what Kramer is telling them to do because he has prompts that tell him what to say. And since 90% of media is owned by hedge funds, which was an absolute genius move by them, but it also gets to push any narrative they want.
And I don't think we're that off from this.
Yeah, correct.
Kevin, I enjoyed this. Thank you so much for doing it. I look forward to following your work. I'm so glad that I was
Appreciate it,
able to
Mike.
discover you on X. And if you're available, I'd love to have you back on.
Yeah, I'd love to be on. Thank you for the opportunity, Mike. A lot of great questions today. Come on my show anytime and raise your hand there too. I'd love to have you over there. But I appreciate the opportunity and thank you so much.
I look forward to it. Thanks, Kevin. Mic drop.